Welcome to Commander Central, episode 344, and today we're taking a look at listener C. Bryan's Oskar Rubbish Reclaimer deck. I'm Dana.
And I'm Chris.
Chris, how you doing today, man?
Oh, I'm alive, I guess.
Max is home and healthy and doing just great, except for his voice is kind of shot because he had a bad reaction to his anesthesia in the hospital, so he was throwing up and his vocal cords sound awful, so he sounds like he's been smoking 6 packs a day, so we're giving him a break. It was supposed to be just Chris and I recording last week, and then stuff kept coming up, so we couldn't even get that together, so this week it is at least you and I, and hopefully we'll have Max back next week.
True. You know, speaking of 6 packs a day, when I was younger, I used to smoke about 2 packs a day. So I can't imagine even trying to smoke 6 packs a day. I think I would die.
You just never do anything else but smoke.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went and had a drink with him the other day, and he's doing pretty good. He's bounced back from a surgery real well, so he's in good shape. Other than his voice just sounds awful, so.
Cool beans.
Yeah. You got a chance to play much at all lately, Chris?
No, not really. I played a 1v1 tournament and got my bleepity bleep kicked in, but... was unfortunate.
What deck did you wind up playing?
I played Klothys, so it's the red-green god for 3 mana. Has an ability at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you exile a card from a graveyard. If it is a land, you add a red or green mana to your mana pool. If not, then your opponents take 2 damage and you gain 2 life.
Okay.
So the night before, I'm like putting this deck together, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is a genius idea. I like this card and this card. It's like 4 o'clock in the morning when I'm doing this. The tournament's at noon. So then I go to bed, get up, start playing in the tournament, and I'm drawing my hand, and I'm like, what kind of drugs was I on when I put this deck together? Because it was horrible. Like, I mean, some of these cards were in there, and I'm like, that was not a good idea. What was I thinking?
I've done that before, where I put afterwards, like 2 weeks later, even you're like, what was my thought process there?
Yeah, because like I started just like after the tournament, I'm pulling cards off to the side, and one of the guys who I play with a lot, he's like, yeah, why did you put that in there? I'm like, I don't know. I had a stack of like 20 cards that should come out.
Oh, yeah, that always feels terrible. Well, I will quick talk about it. I played a game last night on stream, and I got knocked out. I killed Joey fairly early, and then I got knocked out. So it was down to actually the 2 guests we had on stream, Giraffe and Nat and Anna Margaret, both EDH players and cosplayers. So it was down to the 2 of them just like smashing each other in the face back and forth. I got to talk about the ending really quick, because it might be the coolest ending I'd ever seen to a Commander game.
Okay.
And they had both built up decent board states, and the game kept swinging back and forth, and Nat got out an Avacyn Angel of Hope, so she had built up an indestructible board state.
Yep.
But she was having trouble punching through. And then she had dropped a Stalking Vengeance, which whenever a creature you control dies, it deals damage equal to its power to target player or planeswalker. But
they're all indestructible.
But they're all indestructible because they have a
Yep.
And mind you, she had gotten hit and knocked down to 1 life 2 different times and gained life back up. And she was
I know where this is going.
And she was back down to 1. So she alpha strikes in, swings, and Margaret lines all her blockers up, and then the stuff that she couldn't block came through for her. So as they go to calculate damage, Nat Swords to Plowshares her own Avacyn.
Yes, I knew that's where this was going. I knew it.
So the damage got actually dealt to the creature. The creatures would actually die then, in between that and the damage that got through, it was, I think, by just 2 or 3 life points, just enough. And she's also sitting at 1, so it was just enough to squeeze, because it was like 1 to 40 some life,
oh boy.
And Margaret had like 46, 48 life, whatever it was. It was amazing. It was like just a perfect kind of EDH play. I was, just fantastic to watch. I love watching games end like that.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of stuff happen like that throughout the years that I've been playing Magic.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I'm going to kill my own thing. And it's like, oh, I didn't think about that when I did this.
Yeah. And I played a few games in the shop this week. The one thing so I played against a guy, and he only really had 1 deck. He had a Arcades, the Strategist, the one that lets you attack with your walls.
Yep.
And I felt a little bit bad about doing it, but like it was the play to make every time. I kept having an answer to kill his Arcades or do something to his Arcades, bounce it to his hand or whatever it was. during his attack steps, like he'd like move to combat, and I'm like, okay, well, before you declare attackers, I'm going to kill Arcades, because then you can't, he doesn't have a chance to recast it.
Yep.
And I did it to him like 3 games in a row. After he would do like, okay, I'm going to cast, an overrun and move to combat. I'm like, before you declare attackers. And then like next game he did it to a Triumph of the Hordes, I think, and I did it again. And I was like, well, I mean, that sucks. Like but I'm gonna die otherwise, right? Like I gotta do it. So I did that to him a couple games in a row. So I'm mentioning that because if you are playing a deck like that that's super vulnerable to like having that command, like it gets shut off entirely when your commander's off the board, have backup plans or have ways to keep that from happening. Arcades deck, you're playing blue, you're also
white
in green, so
and
there's
green.
There's lots of ways to give
colors.
Lots of ways to give hexproof to your stuff if you need to. So those are the kind of decks where I definitely think if I was playing Arcades, I would have probably half a dozen different ways to like save Arcades in those situations.
Yeah, some sort of protection,
Yeah.
blinks. I mean, then you can even go into the artifacts, and you've got the boots and the greaves. And
exactly, yeah.
Whisper Silk Cloak. I mean, all that fun jazz.
Yeah, you just got to keep that on the field, or your deck doesn't do anything, or you got a bunch of walls that just can't like attack. So
yeah, was he playing the 2 enchantments that are in those colors too?
He did. He had the green one. I didn't see. There's a white one too, I think. Is it?
It's blue-white.
Blue-white, okay. And I think there's an old white one called Rolling Stones, I think, that lets walls attack. But
yes.
The deck isn't all walls. There's some descriptions of defenders. I'm not sure if he's running that. He had the green one out at least. I saw that one. And that was one I bounced one time too. Arcades had gotten killed in the next turn. He came with those, and I think I hit that unexpectedly absent and bounced it back to the top of his library. So yeah, he did at least have a couple things that duplicate Arcades effect, which is useful. And in the deck tech we're going to talk about today, I actually does a kind of a similar situation. I'm going to suggest having ways to duplicate what Oskar can do as well for that same reason. But
okay,
I just wanted to throw that out there because that was something that came up, and I was actually thinking as it's happening, like I should mention this in the podcast because that's a useful thing to bear in mind if your deck is super aligned to the commander being in play.
Now, did you bring that up to him at all when you were playing?
We did. We talked about it a little bit, and he's like, yeah, he's also kind of new to actually playing Commander. He's not new to Magic, but he's kind of new to Commander. He's like, yeah, I'm still getting a feel for like what stuff I need to do to make the deck work, what ways I want it to work, that kind of thing. So yeah, and he was, I made him some suggestions for him to do, and he's going to look at making a few tweaks this week to make it a little more resilient.
Sweet.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, if you out there on Listener Land played some fun games or have some ideas about how to keep your commander safe, how would you go about suggesting those to us, Chris?
Well, you can reach us on a multitude of social media platforms. You can find us on Twitter at CMDR Central. You can search us up on Facebook, CMDR Central. You can find us on YouTube by searching CMDR Central, and you can also find us online at cmdrcentral.com.
Also find us on patreon.com. There are multiple different tiers you can join, including this one to get a Decks You Play episode like we're going to do here in just a few minutes. Chris, we had a little bit of news this week. We got the first burst of cards from...
Stop. I don't even want to know. Stop. I thought we were done with this.
Never done. It is never over.
They couldn't wait till like after Christmas or something?
No, it was the Phyrexia All Will Be One previews, and we got to see the new Elish Norn and some pretty cool pieces of art. So it wasn't too overwhelming. It was just a couple cards and like teasers to get people excited for the set. New Elish Norn is pretty solid. It's basically a Panharmonicon built into it's not Null Rod. What's the artifact that keeps ETBs from happening?
Oh, I'm having a brain fart. Something fierce there.
People are yelling at us right now, and I forgot what it was. But anyway, that one. So she doubles your ETBs and turns off other ETBs for other people, which is kind of a similar thing to what they've all been doing.
So it's kind of like a Hushbringer type effect.
Yeah. So you get twice as much. Your opponents get half as much. So yeah, that's and it's the piece of art on it is fantastic. It's a super cool Elish Norn art, and we just got a bunch of cool pieces of Phyrexian art and like little teases of old creatures coming back. There's like a completed version of Slowbad from back in the original Mirrodin set, who's now a Phyrexian, and there's some creature that's using Venzer's corpse. It's kind of gross looking. So I mean, there's definitely a Phyrexian horror theme to the set. So I'm looking forward to it. I mean, it's a never-ending thing, but Phyrexians are pretty cool, so that always has my attention.
I thought Koth was dead.
He just hadn't been around, but I think they always kept it kind of vague because it was like he's facing overwhelming odds, but he hadn't died. So they did show the new Koth Planeswalker as well. So he is alive.
Yeah, I opened up the spoilers
Yep.
for it just to see if there's anything special, and first thing I saw was Koth, and I'm like, I swear you were dead.
So there's 10 Planeswalkers in the set, 5 Mythic, 5 at Rare, and 5 of them, and they told us the names of the 10, so we know who they all are. 5 of them will be completed Phyrexian Planeswalkers that have already been converted, and 5 will be ones that aren't. And we know Koth is one of the ones who is not. So he has survived and at least not been completed yet. So of the other 9 on the list, 5 will wind up being Phyrexians.
Yeah, so Tamio's probably one of them. Johnny's probably one of them.
No, they are not in this collection. So it's ones beyond those 2.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Jace is there. Vraska's there.
Jace is Phyrexian? Yes,
possibly.
I knew it was coming.
There's a 1 or 5 in 9 chance of it being Jace. I would be shocked if they did that, but who knows? Yeah. So that's an interesting storyline. They're kind of trying to like do the thing from back in the original or the second Mirrodin set where like, is the last set going to be New Phyrexia or Mirrodin Pure? Nobody knew who won the war till the third set came out, kind of. So it's kind of the same thing. Which one of the planes they're trying to kind of mirroring that? Which one of the planeswalkers are getting turned into Phyrexians? So
okay,
looks pretty cool.
Should be good.
Yeah. All right. So having talked about that, I suppose we can just jump into taking a look at this deck.
Sure thing.
So we have a few questions we always send out to ask, and, what is the meta like? I play weekly at a local LGS. The meta ranges from upgraded precons to CEDH, and the shop owner does a great job of organizing each pod and making sure a Rule Zero discussion is held.
That's amazing. I like hearing that. Next question we ask is, what is the goal of the deck? It's an Oskar's Doomsday deck, so kind of combo-based. Actually, when I was looking through it, the combo is really not all that powerful, but it is still a combo-based deck. Mm-hmm. Built the deck to hang in casual pods and did not add any fast mana or free interaction except for a Pact of Negation, which is used to protect, the Doomsday pile, when you get it all set up and going. Need something or another. And very limited tutors. Wanted to focus on Oskar's ability to break timing restrictions and play at instant speed. The deck focuses on discard synergy, and you also really wanted to find a home for Unfulfilled Dreams and Breath Stealer's Crypt.
Okay.
So then we also ask areas of weakness and what we should focus on. And areas of weakness is being overrun by creature-heavy decks and a lack of card draw, since the majority of them are looting effects. So you're not actually gaining cards per se. You still have card draw, but you're not gaining cards in your hand.
You're gaining card quality more than you are like card event, like physically coming out ahead on cards.
True. Also open to any other win cons and other things to do with the Doomsday piles. Budget for a single card or all upgrades is nothing over, like $100. So let's not suggest any dual lands.
Yes.
Because this is blue-black, so I'm going to just throw out there, Underground Sea is off the table.
As it should be, because, that card is crazy. Yeah, okay. So Oskar, Rubbish Reclaimer, 3 blue and black, mentions Dimir for a human wizard 3/3. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each different mana value among cards in your graveyard. Assuming you're milling some stuff, which this deck's going to want to be milling, it could be as cheap as 2 mana to cast, even with the commander tax down the road. So that's very, very useful. Also says, whenever you discard a non-land card, you may cast it from your graveyard. So basically the talking about the looting and rummaging kind of effects. If you have a spell that draws you a card, makes you discard a card, you can draw a card and then pitch the thing that you were going to then cast anyway, right? So it basically eliminates a lot of the downside of discarding it. In addition to that, maybe you're discarding a thing that you want to discard intentionally because you're going to reanimate it or you're going to do some other kind of graveyard shenanigans with it anyway. So it's just one more way to turn that supposed downside of having to discard a thing into an upside. I have not really seen an Oskar deck in the wild, and I frankly had forgotten that this was one of those commanders where I'm like, that's a thing? I had not even remembered this being a commander because we get so many every single set. So I had not really looked at this commander before or had much experience with it. How about you, Chris?
No, I have never seen this deck before. Like I saw, as soon as I opened it up and I saw what the commander was, I'm like, oh, I like this. This should be fun.
That's actually, that is kind of cool. They one of the things they've done a really good job of in the last couple years is putting interesting commanders like don't do the same thing in color pairs. It felt like for a long time, the only thing you got in Boros was some kind of like equipment commander. The only thing you got in Dimir was, mill stuff. And I guess this does kind of interact with mill a little bit, but it's a different way to do that. They've given people a bunch of different ways to play a bunch of these color pairs, and this is an example of that. So,
Yep.
Okay, so let's take a look at the lands here first. There are a total of 7 swamps and 7 islands for the basics. For the non-basic, you have a Bajuka Bog to attack the graveyards. Cabal Pits, that's a land that taps for a black mana and deals 1 damage to you, and it also has Threshold. So if there's 7 or more cards in your graveyard, you can spend a black and sacrifice it, and a target creature gets a -2/-2 until end of turn. Cephalid Coliseum, same thing with Threshold. Taps for blue instead of black, and you can spend a blue and sacrifice it if there are 7 more cards in your graveyard, and target player draws 3 cards and discards 3 cards from their hand. Clearwater Pathway, the MDFC land. Command Tower, Drowned Catacombs. Emergence Zone is a land that taps for colorless mana, and you can spend 1 and sack it, and you can cast spells this turn as though it had flash. Exotic Orchard, add 1 mana of any color that a land an opponent controls could produce. Fetid Pools is a fetchable land. It's an island swamp with cycling 2. Comes into play tapped. Exotic Orchard makes mana of any color, and it gives an opponent a 1/1 color with spirit creature token. Gyreach Sanitarium. Each player draws a card and discards a card with an activated ability of 2 mana. You have Morphic Pool. Mystic Sanctuary. Card that's so good it gets played in Eternal formats.
And it is banned in Modern.
Yes. Otawara, the Soul Ring City, taps for a blue, or it's a channel land. Spend 3 in a blue, and you can discard it to bounce a thing, creature, enchantment, or planeswalker. Fetch land in Polluted Delta, Shipwreck Mars, and Sunken Hollow Good Duels. Takanuma, the Abandoned Mire, similarly to Otawara. This is a channel land that lets you mill a couple cards and return a creature or planeswalker from your graveyard to hand. Underground River, Urborg to make everything into swamps for fixing, and a Watery Grave. So, I mean, pretty good set of duels there to make sure you have access to all your colors, and some things that put cards in the graveyard, like Cephalid Coliseum. Anything that you would change in the lands there, Chris?
I can't complain about this land base. It's really good.
If you wanted to nitpick, occasionally Exotic Orchard's only going to make you 1 or 2 of your colors. And I think Sunken Ruins is relatively cheap these days. That's one of the Warwind filters.
Yep.
If you wanted to make a slight tweak once in a while, Sunken Ruins is going to be slightly better than Exotic Orchard, and I think you can get it for like $8 or $10 last time I checked, because it did have a reprint in Double Masters. So that's maybe a small change I would make. The price on Manamo School at Water's Edge has gone up. It was 10 to 12, and now it's, I think, almost 30 again. That's the original Kamigawa legendary land that taps for blue, or you can spend a blue to use it to untap a legendary permanent. If you happen to have one in your collection, I would put that in place of one of your islands, because just once in a while you're going to be able to catch somebody off guard when they swing in and think they can, hit you for damage or hit one of your planeswalkers, and you can untap one of your tapped creatures, or you can occasionally use it. This deck has like a couple creatures like Jace Vryn's Prodigy that have tap abilities that you can use to filter cards. You can use your Jace ability twice on a turn or something. Like, it's not amazing in this particular deck, but it's got some upside, and if you happen to have one lying around, I would put it in there because it's done some good. This isn't a perfect deck for it. Usually you want it in a deck that has like big beater creatures that you're going to want to untap with to give them kind of semi-vigilance, or a bunch of activated abilities and legendary creatures. It only has a couple. But if you have one, I would put it in the deck because there's just really no downside and it's all upside.
Yeah, it's also good. It's a good political card too. Like,
for
if
sure,
your opponent has a legendary creature or something, you can untap it for them.
Absolutely. It's right. It's not just restricted to your stuff. You can use it on somebody else's for sure.
Yep.
And, if you are, like, there's not a ton of permanents in this deck for, like, Nykthos or something, but just in general, being able to untap things like a Nykthos, which is a legendary land, is super useful as well. Again, this isn't the perfect deck for it, but if you happen to have one, I tend to like that if I'm playing blue.
Yeah, I mean, you could also play a Cabal Coffers Urborg type of style too, because you are spending mana to cast the cards out of the graveyard,
Yeah.
So if you're pitching, 3 or 4 cards in a turn, having that excess of mana, you can get them all cast in once.
Yep. And there is, you mentioned the Urborg, but there is 7 swamps in here. There is the Watery Grave. There is the Fetid Pool. So there are, there's 10 swamps in here just natively, in addition to the Urborg that might turn everything into swamps. So,
yep.
Yeah. There's only 2 planeswalkers, Chris. What are the 2 planeswalkers we have here?
We got a Kaito Shizuki and a Teferi Master of Time. I don't even know what Kaito does. What? I've never seen this one. I think I've pulled one and I never played it. Let me see. So Kaito is a 3-mana planeswalker that comes in with 3 loyalty. So 1 colorless, blue, and a black. At the beginning of your upkeep, if Kaito entered the battlefield this turn, he phases out. What in the world we got going on here? So draw a card, then discard a card unless you attacked this turn for a +1. Create a 1/1 blue ninja creature token with this creature can't be blocked. Evil ninjas, hate them all. Sorry about that. The thing moved on me. There we go. And then -7 for Kaito is you get an emblem with whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, search your library for a blue or black creature card and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. That's actually pretty good.
Yeah, so so basically this is here for the draw a card, then discard a card. And because of Kaito's the phasing ability, you're always going to get 2 activations. You're going to get the first one, it's going to phase out end of turn, come back next, so people can't attack him, basically. And he'll come back next turn, you'll be able to do it again. So by the time anyone gets a swing at him, he'll be at 5 loyalty, assuming you're going to use the +1. That's pretty decent for a 3-mana thing. That's going to let you get two loots out of it as well. So that makes sense. It just has a value piece in here.
Interesting. Very interesting.
And, hey, it's a Teferi, and it doesn't really matter which Teferi it is. It's probably good.
Everyone should know this Teferi. I mean, this is a Teferi that says, you know what? I get to do everything on everyone's turn.
I will do all of the things.
You have to live with it.
Yep. Yes. And again, +1, draw a card, discard a card. That's always useful. And you can use Teferi Master Time anytime you could cast an instant on other players' turn. So,
which is ridiculous.
Disgusting, yeah. And if
I'm surprised that card's not played more, to be honest with you.
Yes, absolutely. And again, being able to play it, and if no one can kill Teferi right away, you're going to get, for 4 mana, you're going to get 4 loots by the time it comes back around your next turn. That's insane.
Yeah, and if they don't do it fast enough, you just start taking, 2 extra turns?
Yeah. Ugh, the card's nuts. So yes, both those cards are pretty good value pieces in general, but they make sense in this deck because of the looting on the +1.
Yes, agreed.
So very much get it here. Let's go over the instants. Chris, what do we have here for instants?
We have 14 instants. We have an Ancient Excavation, Arcane Denial, Delay, Evacuation, Frantic Search, Gush. Ooh, Gush.
Literally entire books written about Gush.
I saw this and I'm like, oh, are we playing some Legacy over here? What's going on here? Insidious Dreams, Obsessive Search. Obsessive Search, for those of you who probably don't know, because this card does not get played a lot, it is literally draw a card for 1 blue mana at instant speed with Madness of 1. Another Legacy type of card. Pact of Negation, Predict, Reality Shift, Resculpt, Snap, and Tainted Indulgence.
Tainted Indulgence is from New Capenna, I think. Draw 2 cards, then discard a card unless there are 5 or more mana values among cards in your graveyard, which in this deck there probably will be pretty often. And if there isn't, well, that's okay too, because you want to discard stuff.
Yes. Most of these cards in here look like they are protection or card draw-esque type of cards.
Yes. So anything you liked or particularly disliked here?
Frantic Search is awesome. I think it's an amazing card. I'm surprised more people don't play it type of thing, but that's probably my favorite card out of all of them. I understand the reason to be playing all this counter magic and stuff like that, but then again, I think it kind of pulls out cards that you should be playing otherwise to play off of Oskar's ability more.
It's tough because we talked about this before. You want to be able to protect your own stuff. But the problem with these kind of decks is you're being pulled. There's so many things you need to do to get the deck to work the way you want it to work.
Yes. And
there doesn't feel like there's enough slots to do all of those things.
Yeah, this definitely feels like it should be like a 150 card deck type of thing.
A little bit, yeah, for sure.
I guarantee if I built it, that's what it would be, and then it would just sit on my desk, and I'd be like, I hate this. This sucks.
So that was the problem I had. I have a couple suggestions for things, but I didn't really know what to suggest to take out.
Yes.
One of the things I wondered if wouldn't be useful is having counter spells that also had stifle effects baked in, like disallow or something. That way you can deal with somebody trying to take out your graveyard.
Okay.
But I'm like, okay, but then you have to, most of those cost a little more. Like, it's not ideal to run a stifle, just a stifle. Usually you want it that can do a counterspell or a stifle effect. Those usually cost like 3 or 4 mana sometimes that have the ability to do both. And that's not fun to leave up that much mana either, especially when you're only at 14 instants in the deck. So I understand why he probably isn't running a bunch of those too.
Yeah. Like, it's hard with this type of style of deck because of the colors that it's in and stuff.
Yeah.
But I would like to be playing cards. Now I know mana drain's off the table because of price value.
Sure.
I think it's upwards of the 100. But there's the other one. The name's eluding me. The 5 mana one that creates treasures when you counterspell it. It's the mana drain for 5 mana.
Yeah. I almost said Revel and Riches. It's not Revel and Riches. It's
that's a combo with it.
Yeah. Hold on for 1 sec. I'll look it up here. Spell Swindle is what it is.
Okay, so Spell Swindle is definitely one that I would suggest, but in blue-black, it's hard to, hold up 5 mana.
Yeah, right.
Because you're not playing, a bunch of mana rocks. You're not in green or anything else where you're ramping lands out. So, but I would love to have those treasures to be able to cast the spells off Oscar's ability.
Yeah. And this is also the other problem with this kind of deck is it's one thing when someone like suggests a green stompy deck, and even if we don't know the commander, we kind of know the archetype real well. Like, that's a simple thing to, even if we haven't played your particular commander, played that particular deck, we have enough experience with something similar.
Yep.
This where you're running on a ton of looting effects to a doomsday pile is pretty singular. There's not a lot of other decks that do this kind of thing, so there's not a lot of experience we have necessarily with it. So like I think a lot of the kind of stuff you have to play it to get a feel for it in this kind of deck, and having not played it, like Predict is a card in the instance. One of the blue, choose a card name. Then target player puts the top card of their library into the graveyard. If that card has the chosen name, you draw 2 cards. Otherwise, you draw a card. So there's no top deck manipulation. So like you're probably never going to choose the card name right, and you're probably always going to target yourself. So it's a 2 mana to mill 1 card and draw 1. Okay, is that good? It doesn't look particularly amazing, but in this deck maybe it is, but I'm not sure. Right? Like, so I don't want to say cut Predict, because I think you have to have played with Predict in this kind of deck to really get a feel for how good it is, and I'm just not sure.
Yeah, I like that card because what it's doing is it's replacing itself to mill a card, whereas most mill cards just force a mill and don't actually replace themselves. So, I mean, this just has the, better value overall.
And hey, I'm never going to tell someone to cut a card with Rebecca Guayard on it, because
right?
I love her stuff. 2 cards I would throw out here as a maybe include. Again, I don't know what you would cut, because he talked about having issues with creature swarms attacking. Sudden Spoiling is always great in a ton of different ways, but one of them is it's basically a fog as well. If someone comes at you, so it can, if someone swings at you with a bunch of giant beating creatures, well, you just cast that, and not only do you not take damage, but you can probably kill a bunch of them by blocking with your, even if your creatures aren't terribly impressive, theirs are now, 0/2s. So you kill a bunch of stuff that they thought wasn't going to get killed. Similarly, Polymorphous Jest is a similar thing. It doesn't have split second, but also, that's how busted Sudden Spoiling is Polymorphous Jest isn't nearly as good, and it's still a fantastic card. So those are ones you can consider. Darkness just got that reprint in the Warhammer decks, and the price dropped, so like you have access to a fog in black is pretty useful as well.
The funniest thing about Darkness, so this is a tangent, sorry everybody, but during the 1v1 tournament, I had my tokens for the Clothis deck that I was playing, and I opened up my tokens kit and pulling out my tokens to put a couple tokens out that I had made, and I found a Darkness in my tokens pile, and I'm like, I wonder when I bought that. I've been looking for that. I wanted one of these for a while.
Yeah, it's down to like $4-ish, I think, if you get the Warhammer version, because the Time Spiral one and the Legends one, were both like closing in on 15, I think. So it wouldn't surprise me if those Warhammer decks didn't have a ton of printings, and I know they're gonna supposedly make more copies, but I have not seen a ton of them out there. So I would, if you want a Darkness, grab one now. It is a super useful card, having a fog in black.
Yeah, and it'll catch people off guard, and it's wonderful.
Yep. Okay, so let's jump down here and take a look at the artifacts.
Artifacts.
We have an Anvil of Bogardan, 2 mana. Each player skips their discard phase, but during each player's draw phase, that player draws an additional card and then discards a card. So you're getting some discard value here. Arcane Signet.
I really like this card.
I do too, and this is a great deck for it. I think this is a reserve list. It's pretty pricey, but he's already got it. So
yep.
Arcane Signet, Dimir Signet, Felwar Stone, Soul Ring, Talisman of Dominance. Those are the mana rocks you expect to see in a deck that's playing Dimir.
Yes.
There's also a currency converter. Whenever you discard a card, you can exile that card from your graveyard. You can spend 2 mana to draw a card, discard a card, and tap it. And you can also just tap it for no cost and put a card exiled with currency converter into your graveyard. If it's a land, you make a treasure, and if it's a non-land, you make a 2/2 black rogue creature token.
Which is pretty cool. I mean, you get value off the cards that you're doing and stuff like that. So
there's also an Underworld Cookbook, 1 mana, and you can tap it to discard a card and make a food token. So good discard element here. And spend 4, and you can sacrifice it to return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. I'm going to bet this is primarily just being used as a way to discard a card and make a food token that maybe you'll do something with, maybe not. Who cares? The discard is probably the most useful part of that.
Yep.
Anything there, Chris?
Not really. I actually looked through a lot of the artifacts for this deck that should be played in this deck, and there's a few of them that were similar in mana value to like the Cookbook and Currency Converter, but they just have better abilities. So overall, I think it's pretty much set up the way it should be.
Yeah, again, like, I don't know what it would change. I like both of those non-ramp artifacts, well, all 3 of them, I guess, Anvil as well, and would it be nice that there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ramp artifacts here? Would it be nice to be at 7 or 8? Yeah, maybe, but like something has to give, right?
Yes.
We talk about this deck is trying to do a bunch of things, and there's only so many slots. So I get it.
Yeah, because you can definitely throw in like a Thran Dynamo and stuff like that in here because you're only in 2 colors and don't have to worry about that colorless.
Yep.
Which would be super nice for some of the spells that you want to cast. But...
Right. All right, so should we take a look at the enchantments here, Chris? What do we have?
Sure, we have 4 enchantments. Now, during our notes, he did state that he wanted to get Breathstealer's Crypt and Unfulfilled Desires into the deck. Currently looks like he does have them in the deck. So we have Breathstealer's Crypt, Faith of the Devoted, Secrets of the Dead, and Unfulfilled Desires.
So those are 4 enchantments that you will not see in basically any deck unless it's a deck just like this for the most part.
I don't know. Some of these cards look pretty cool. Like, I didn't even realize some were cards like Breathstealer's Crypt. So it's a 4 mana enchantment. Reads, whenever any player draws a card, he or she reveals that card. If the card is a creature card, that player pays 3 life or discards the card. I mean, that just seems like it would just be fun EDH shenanigans in
just
general.
In general, right, yeah.
So, I mean, like, that one, and then Unfulfilled Desires is another older card for 3 mana. 1 and Dimir. 1 mana. Pay 1 life, draw a card, then choose and discard a card. That just seems really good too, though.
In general, it's a pretty solid card, I think.
Yes. Aside from the fact that you are in blue, and usually when you're playing any other type of deck, blue just has way better card draw.
Yeah.
So. Yeah,
no, that is the one that I think probably is just the most generally useful for sure.
Yes.
Secrets of the Dead was the first one I thought, like, when I saw this banner, I'm like, well, I guarantee there's Secrets of the Dead in here, because that's a perfect deck card. And there is. Whenever you cast a spell from your graveyard, draw a card. Well, okay, that's amazing in this deck. And then the last enchantment of the 4 was Faith of the Devoted. Whenever you cycle or discard a card, you can spend a 1, and each opponent loses 2 life, and you gain 2 life.
Yes. This is definitely a card I would think of more in like a Rakdos style deck, because red has more of the, looting effects when you're, or impulse draws or whatever that draws for red. I can't even think
impulse
of it
draw,
right now. Yeah. So.
I mean, I like all 4 of them in this deck.
I do too.
Yeah.
I do have a suggestion for an enchantment, though.
Yeah,
and
what's
this
that?
enchantment is broken. Let me find it. Okay, so this is another older enchantment. This is from, I think it's Stronghold is the set. I could be wrong on that. So it is called Dream Halls. So 3 colorless and double blue. And it reads, instead of paying the casting cost for a spell of any color, its caster may choose and discard a card that shares at least 1 color with that spell. And then it reads, if a spell is X in its casting cost, X is 0. So the way I look at this card is, I discard a card, trigger Oskar, go to play that card, discard another card from my hand, trigger Oskar, go to play that card, discard another card from my hand, trigger Oskar, and you can just kind of do this. Now, this is going to eat your hand a lot. Like it's none other.
Yes.
But it allows you to kind of chain a whole bunch of spells together in one go if you need to.
Yeah. And, it's risky. There's some decks where, because this affects everyone.
Yes. Yeah,
So
you're gonna run
you,
into a Gavi deck or whatever. I think
yeah,
that's Gavi that does like cycling and everything. And you're gonna be
yeah.
like, oh, that was a mistake to play this card.
But it also, there's times it's going to blow up, and it's going to be why you win the game too.
Yes.
Yeah,
I
Dream
was
Balls
just
is good
thinking
and good.
Yeah, I was thinking of ways that you could kind of skirt the mana cost, because this is a very mana intensive deck. If you
Yes.
pitch something, that's at like 4 mana and then trigger to pay it, but you had to pay for the card that already did that. So I mean, it any way that you can kind of cheat it out a little bit seems good to me.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so let's go up here and take a look at the sorceries in the deck. We have Black Sun Zenith for a board wipe, Bone Shards, sorcery for 1 mana, additional cost to cast a spell, you sacrifice a creature or discard a card and destroy target creature or planeswalker. Chart a course, draw 2, and then discard a card unless you attack with a creature this turn. So if you don't want to discard,
favorite blue spells.
love Chart a course, yeah. So if you don't want to discard, just do it, first main phase. If you want to discard, do it second main phase. That's super useful.
Yep.
Damnation is a board wipe. Dark Petition, as it's going to pretty often, if you're not casting in the first couple turns of the game, it's just a demonic tutor. A Deep Analysis, target player draws 2 cards, and you can flash it back for 1 of the blue and paying 3 life to draw 2 more cards again. Doomsday is kind of what talk about this deck being built around. Triple black, search your library and graveyard for 5 cards and exile the rest. So you're going down to basically a 5-card library at that point with the 5 you grabbed from your library and graveyard. And you lose half your life rounded up. So
usually when someone casts this card, it is either counterspell this card or I win the game. Usually.
Exactly, yeah, because they know what cards are gonna stack on their library for what purpose to win the game with it.
Yep.
Feed the Swarm is just a way to deal with enchantments in colors that don't have ways to do that. Ideas Unbound, double blue, where you draw 3 cards and discard 3 cards at the end of turn. So it feeds into what you're doing. Night's Whisper, just a cheap, efficient draw spell, one of my favorite cards of all time.
Yep.
Seagate Restoration, MDFC, so I guess technically it counts as a land here as well, but you draw cards equal to the number of cards in your hand plus 1, and you have no maximum hand size. And that's 8 mana, so it's fairly expensive for that, but it's also technically kind of not really using up a slot in your deck because it's going to be sitting on the back of a land.
Yep.
Sickening Dreams, 1 in a black. As additional cost to play Sickening Dreams, you discard X cards from your hand, and Sickening Dream deals X damage to each creature and each player. So it's a way to clear the board a little bit while pitching a bunch of cards, assuming you are going to be wanting to do that. Solve the Equation, search your library for instant or sorcery card, reveal it and put it in your hand, and then shuffle. That's for 2 and a blue. Toxic Deluge, board wipe. Turbulent Dreams, it's double blue. As additional cost to play it, you discard X cards from your hand and you return X target non-land permanents to their owner's hand. So discard some stuff and bounce some stuff. Unearth, return a creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. You can also cycle that. Whispering Madness, each player discards his or her hand, then draws cards equal to the greatest number of cards a player discarded this way, and it has Cipher. And last but not least, Windfall. Each player discards their hand, then draws cards equal to the greatest number of cards a player discarded this way.
Yep.
I mean, those are almost all cards that interact logically with what the deck is doing.
Yes, I do like the expensive tutors in this deck.
Yeah.
Not playing your super efficient ones. That really spoke to me because I've been trying to do that with decks too, trying to pull out the super, efficient ones, efficient cards to try to slow the decks down a little bit, which kind of is a mistake in our shop lately, apparently. The last time I played in there, I got just rocked, and I was like, wow, okay, I guess we upped the power level. Okay, no one told me about this.
Yeah, I mean, is your deck going to be better if you swap out Solve the Equation and Dark Petition for Demonic Tutor and Vamp Tutor? Yes. And, it's also going to be more expensive. But
yes.
That adds something that you have to play around those more expensive tutors too. So 6 one, half dozen of the other, it changes the power level, and I personally find it a little more interesting to have some restrictions.
Yeah, I definitely got to say though, Dana, if you played against this deck, I guarantee you die to Sickening Dreams. You're going to be sitting at 3 life, and they're just going to discard 3 cards to kill you.
Yes. I actually died the other day to my own Phyrexian Arena again, not for the first time.
Oh, no.
Not the first time, will probably not be the last.
I have died to my own cards, too. That's the downside to playing my Mogus deck, is there's a few times where I get it all set up, and then I look, I'm like, oh, I just killed myself. Oops.
Well, in the same game, I died to Phyrexian Arena, and Joey Schultz from Media Trackcast with me died to, I forget, there's some zombie that whenever another zombie dies, you draw a card and lose a life.
Okay.
He died to his own zombie that did that because I killed like 3 or 4 zombies when he was at 3 or 4 life or whatever it was. So he died to that, and then I died to Mount Franks Arena. So we both killed ourselves from our own card draw damage effects.
It's a good way to go out, though.
Exactly, makes for a good story. I'm talking about it. So yeah, for sure. All right, should we talk about creatures, Chris? What do we have here?
We got 18 of these creatures floating around here. We got an All-Seeing Arbiter, Archfiend of Ifnir. What is this? So Archfiend of Ifnir is a 5/4 flyer. Whenever you cycle or discard another card, put a -1/-1 counter on each creature your opponents control, and it has cycling itself. Oh boy, that's a real good card. Good thing Gavi is not in those colors.
Yes.
Bone Miser, Cabal Initiate, Containment Construct.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the new one that whenever you discard a card, you may exile that card from your graveyard. If you do, you may play that card this turn. That seems really good in this deck. Dothy Voidwalker, Ghostly Pilferer, Jace Vryn's Prodigy, Laboratory Maniac. Hey, guess what? I found the Doomsday combo. Ledger Shredder, Malevolent Hermit, Olivia's Dragoon, Street Wraith, Stronghold Biologist, Stronghold Machinist.
Yep.
There's 2 of these homies? That's awesome. Thassa's Oracle, Volhar Voldalkin Desecrator, and a Waterfront Bouncer. Oh, Waterfront Bouncer, how I miss you. I miss back in the day. So all these cards look really good. A lot of them I'm not quite sold on though, such as the Stronghold Biologist and the Stronghold Machinist. Both of them are double blue tap for an ability. Discard a card from your hand, counter target non-creature spell for the Machinist, and the Biologist is to counter a creature spell. So non-creature and creature. I don't know if I'd want those per se over a Merfolk Looter type of card or whatever, because there's 7 of them, I think, or something dumb like that. I think I'd rather have the ability to pitch cards and then trigger Oscar's ability, but I'm not sure in the meta that he is playing in if maybe those are kind of required cards to protect other stuff.
Yeah, basically, this was probably the toughest part for me to figure out what cards were super good and which ones weren't. Having not played the deck, it's just tough to tell. So yeah, that's what I struggle with too, is just determining what's powerful and what's not. I guess I think would have to get a bunch of play with the deck to really realize it.
Yeah, I agree. So a few cards that I was looking at that might be something to think about, and I'm not sure if they'll actually play in here well, is Patrician's Geist is a 3-mana 2/2 spirit. With flying, other spirits you control get +1/+1. That's not what you're looking for. It's more of spells you cast from your graveyard cost 1 less to cast.
Yeah.
So, anything like that maybe to reduce the casting cost off of your spells that you do pitch and Oscar triggers might be worth it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure neither, because like you just said, you need to play the deck to figure it out, especially a very niche deck like this. So.
Right. Similarly, one creature I had as first suggestion was Tormod the Desecrator. 3 and a black. He's a 4/2 zombie wizard. Whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard, you create a tapped 2/2 zombie creature token.
Yes.
That's anytime you make a thing leave your graveyard, whether you're exiling or you're replaying or whatever you're doing, you're making a zombie. It doesn't require you to spend a mana to do that or anything. It's just passively going to make you bodies. They're tapped, which isn't perfect, but it's still going to give you, attackers if you need to, maybe. But more importantly, probably it's going to give you blockers, because he talked about how he needs a little bit of defense against people that kind of go wide at him. Just going to passively make you blockers, probably at a pretty good rate considering how much stuff you're casting from your graveyard.
Yeah, that's definitely a really, really good call there.
That was really the only creature I had was Tormod that jumped out at me, and maybe there will be more. But the stuff is so specific in this deck that I had a tough time coming up with other things that maybe would interact with it in a way that's useful for him.
Yeah, there's definitely lots of good creatures that could play in this deck,
mm-hmm.
but it's definitely something that needs to be tested type of thing.
For sure.
Was this good during this game? No, it really wasn't. It actually did nothing. So I got to find something that does this or does that. And
this is very much a deck on the whole. It's fun seeing people put their brews to the test and see them work, just to see how well they work. This is one actually that I would like to see play, just because I'm genuinely curious how a bunch of these pieces work and how effective they are, and I think you have to see it to really get a feel for it.
Yeah. I wonder if more cycling cards might be good in this deck. because
Yeah,
then
maybe.
you're getting a card draw off of it and you're pitching it to cast it type of thing. I'm not sure because I didn't do a deep dive onto if there's really that many good cycling creatures or instants or anything like that. So that I'm not sure on, but it could be something to definitely look at.
Well, in the thing that I didn't even think of till I got to the creature section, like Ledger Shredder, the connive ability, since that's a draw and oftentimes a discard is super good in a lot of situations. And I at the top of my head, I don't remember a ton of the connive cards either, so there's probably some of those that are pretty decent in this deck. But is that better than just a looting effect? I don't know.
It could be because I think you have to attack to trigger connive, I do believe. No, not all the time.
Yeah.
So different abilities that actually do connive. Yeah. Connive probably is a good effect because, I mean, if whatever their ability is doing, like if you've cast your second spell this turn, or if you draw on your second card or something like that, just those extra added abilities.
Yeah.
So you're already doing your game plan, so why not add something on top of it?
There's a equipment, a Mask of the Schemer. It's a blue equipment that I run in my Arden and Essior deck. The connives based on how much damage has been dealt.
Okay.
And I've actually on more than one occasion when I've had like Essior suited up with a bunch of pieces of equipment and like is hitting somebody for 30 and has maybe double strike even or something. Where I've been like, oh, I'm gonna mill myself if I'm not careful. I'm like, I hope in the first 30 cards I connive, I find an instant speed way to destroy my Mask of the Schemer, or it's gonna kill me on the second double strike piece of damage.
At that point, it's just like you look over and you're like, oh, that 1/1 token. Guess what? You're gonna get this connive artifact.
Yeah. Oh. But hey, again, that's one of those things. Like if you lose to draw into, that's fine too. There's worse ways that makes for a good story.
Yep. Y'all would be dead right now if I had 150 card deck.
Exactly. If this was a Battle of Wits deck, you'd be screwed. Well, hey, you know what? That was a cool deck to look at. We appreciate that. Thank you for taking the time, Steve Brian, to share this deck with us. That means a lot.
Yes, I definitely liked it a lot. Looking at this card, I was like, oh, this is awesome. I kind of want to do this.
Yeah, again, this just reminds me of like there's just been so many good commanders that have been printed, and it's easy to be a little bit frustrated with how much product is coming out constantly. But the upside of it is there's just a ton of cool commanders, and not only is there a ton of cool commanders, there's a pretty good chance you're the only person in your shop who's built that commander, because there's just so many different things competing for our attention that it lets you build a thing and not have a bunch of other people building the same thing, which is I think kind of neat too.
Agreed.
So, all right. Thank you very much for sharing that deck with us. Thanks to all our listeners out there. We will hopefully have the three of us back next week or two for a show with all of us. Until then, I'm Dana. You can find me on Twitter at Dana Roach. You can find Max at CMDRCentral_Max. And you can find Chris at WiseSquishy1. The show is edited by Rafael Garcia. You can find him on Twitter at Ursa Bear Walker. And our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin MacLeod, licensed via Creative Commons. Until next week, I'm Dana.
And I'm Chris.